good morning. Good morning in this very private setting. Earlier this morning when I went to the polling station in order to cast my vote, I said to myself a little bit of a super intelligence would be badly needed, not only for me, but maybe also for this country. But it is not as easy as it seems, as you will point out, Mrs. Dignum. You are a professor at the University of Umeå in Sweden. You have been advising, or you are advising pretty much every major institution in the world when it comes to AI, UN, European Commission, and else. When I talked yesterday to AI scholars in Austria and I mentioned your name, they were like, oh my God, Mrs. Dignum, she's really, really good. So we are very happy and pleased and honored to have you here on stage. Yeah. My name is EVA KONZETT. I work for the FALTER newspaper, and my employer told me to tell you that, so this might be a brief introduction. Mrs. Dignum, we find ourselves in this university, the most prestigious art university in Vienna. We are surrounded by all this creativity of human mankind, and we can see what the human brain is capable of. And now we have this, let's call him a bully, entering the stage, artificial intelligence, telling us, you know, I'm pretty much better in pretty much everything you thought you were really good at. So is this all just a bluff, or is AI right?
AI is not right nor wrong. I also don't like to talk about AI like it comes to tell us something or as some type of agency, which doesn't. I think the issue of art and AI is mostly one of trying to understand for ourselves what do we mean by art and what do we mean by creation. I don't think AI creates art, but AI is very able to construct art. And the difference between creation and construction or building, it's one which is philosophically complex. But basically what AI does is to look in or have access to every piece of art that ever was conceived in the world, and then have some type of rules that describe what are combinations of all this information, all this art that we have, what are pleasing or aesthetically interesting, potentially interesting combinations, and then it creates those or generates those types of art. We can say, okay, the system did create or did generate this art, but on the other hand, we can also say, not really. We all create this art, and now the system has access to it and can combine and can generate billions of combinations, and some of them might be more interesting. So is art the process of generating art, or is art the result of that process? I think that those are issues that we need really to discuss and to understand.
Do we also have a problem of terminology, of wording?
Yeah.
Language tells history. I really like this example of the German phrase, ich hab keinen Bock. That means I'm not in the mood. And it can be traced back to India, and it can be traced back to how Romani people came from India via Istanbul to Europe. So language is a recycling machine. It takes what exists and it reinvents it semantically. And it is very efficient, but it's not always precise. And we are now using all these existing wordings like intelligence, like neural networks. But is it kind of, do we get the wrong pictures in our heads?
I think so. So words are always kind of limiting our understanding, because it's just we only have some finite number of words, and we understand more than that probably. So yes, when we talk about intelligence referring to AI, we are talking of a completely different type of intelligence than when we talk about people. So there are a lot of work, and I have referred to that many times, in which we say AI is not really intelligent, and as well, AI is not really artificial. So we do need to look at those things in...
How would you call it? What would be a better description?
I don't know, some kind of computational support systems, or I mean, that's a bit the problem. Every word that we'll use, it doesn't really refer to what we're doing. But what are we doing with AI? We are first collecting or making available huge amounts of data, which then at this moment mostly are being dealt with by systems that take statistical methods to find correlations on those data. Those correlations are different from what we would do, so that's why AI really provides us other types of insights that we would not find, but they still remain at that level. So AI is very good at finding correlations, and it will maximize or optimize the results based on some type of preferences over this optimization of these correlations, which can be said to be similar to some of the processes that we do in our brains, but are definitely not the same. So we do much more. Our brain is not just a correlating machine that identifies the preferred correlation over other ones, but we have many more processes. We have capabilities of abstracting from what is there, and we also have other ways to decide what's best than just optimization of a preference. We are not always rational in the sense of optimizing machines, but we are much more able to use other things like altruism, like contextual approximations. We are also much more able to decide good is good enough. An AI machine will go always until the optimal, and sometimes the optimal is not exactly the best. So we do need to see what we are talking about when we talk about intelligence, and at the same time, it is also not artificial, because we cannot have an AI system without having people. Not only the ones who build the systems, but increasingly we are dependent on a huge amount of human work being done in what is increasingly called the digital sweatshops, which is all these people that are curating and taking care of the data and evaluating the data under very bad working conditions, usually in countries in which there are no labor laws on how to do it, and they are doing it for a couple of cents an hour. And that is what is making the AI that we are using. And at the same time, AI is also using most or many of our resources, which we would need for other things. Increasingly, you see that data centers call themselves green. Yes, we are green. We use green energy. But what they are doing, they are using, and we had that in the Netherlands recently, they are using all the available green energy from that region. And then the cities that are in that region, they don't have green energy anymore to use. So we are calling AI green, but it's costing other types of energy, and also water. We are using all available water to cool down the data centers, and soon we will not have water for us.
We'll talk about the energy consumption and the problems a little bit later. I will just stay a little bit on this other term, because it's a crucial one, neural networks. And there is this, there is this positive message that I can tell you. In 2018, scientists were able to artificially build a brain. But it was the brain of a roundworm, and it consisted only of 302 neurons. In the meantime, they are also capable of building brains of fruit fly larvae with 3,000 neurons, but this is where we are scientifically. So it is not that easy to imitate the human brain.
No, definitely not. And what we are doing in AI, again, we are calling it neural networks, but it's again a play of words. A neural network in computer science is a piece of software which takes some input, calculates some statistical value over that input, and depending on that value will fire or call other pieces of software. So it works a bit like in the brain. You have very tiny pieces of software which do a very simple thing, and by depending on what each of those calculations are, it will decide which other pieces of software will do something else. So it is a very stylized understanding of what neurons in the brain do, but again have nothing to do with the way that neurons work in the brain. The work that we see, that you referred to, it's more in, let's say, in the biological sense, trying to reconstruct brains in biologically and creating biological neurons, and the relation between a digital neuron and a biological neuron is basically the word that we use to describe both.
Nevertheless, there has been one idea dominant in public debate especially, and this is this idea of superintelligence, that we are just on the brink of a technology that will be more powerful than we are, that will take power, that will rule mankind and so on. This narrative has been fueled also by public speeches of founders or bosses of the most of the technological of the firms, of the companies. I'm referring to OpenAI, of course, and Sam Altman. So
then is when we have to start worrying.
If it's Sam Altman, we can stop worrying.
If Sam Altman says something, we need to start worrying, definitely. And the other one. So what is the definition of superintelligence? First, technology always increases our powers. My car goes quicker than I go, the airplane can fly and I cannot. So we always have developed technology to empower us on things that our bodies cannot do. So there is nothing different here between the advances of AI technology than what we would have in other types of technology. What do we call superintelligence? If you look at the definition, is a system which will have more capabilities than a person. We do have these systems already for 1 billion years, or as long as mankind exists. 2 persons working together are more intelligent than 1 person. So we do have superintelligence, not the artificial kind, but the natural kind already since ever. And the focus of putting the idea that there will be an artificial computational system which will be more intelligent than us, will take care of all our problems and will take over the world and whatever, has 2 main problems. One is that we are relying on a technology to solve our own problems instead of relying on our capabilities of working together and really sitting. If we don't sit down together and be able to really talk and improve our own collaborations, it's not AI that is going to solve our problems. And at the same time is a narrative which is being put forward, and that's why I say that if Sam Altman says something, we should worry, is being put forward by these companies exactly to hide or to put our sight in the future. Look, we are going to do this superintelligence, and at the same time, that means that don't look at what we are doing at this moment. And they are convincing, and I have been speaking in the European Union and the United Nations, they are convincing our policymakers at this moment that we should let them do whatever they want now, because in the future they will generate this superintelligence, this kind of God, which will then is going to solve our problems.
What do they want, sorry? What do they want from policymakers?
They want power. They have power. We do have to realize that at this moment, the large big tech companies have more power than any of our governments, including the United Nations, including the US. And they are using that power for whatever they want. I'm not saying that they always are using it for bad. I know many of them are trying to do the good thing, but they are keeping the power within themselves. The problem here is that we don't have no democratic way or no public way to inspect what they are doing, because they are private companies and they are being regulated or not outside of what we would like to do. So it is a kind of enticing idea, a system that it is going to solve our problems. But it is first unrealistic, because if we don't are able to discuss what are our problems, the system will also not do it. And it's putting our trust or our belief outside of the organizations that we can control.
In what does their power consist? Is it the data? Is it the possibility to influence any public opinion?
So at this moment, how we are building AI systems, and that's, again, is by putting together all the data of the world, or basically all the data of the world, building huge computational machinery that is able to deal with that data, and then finding out whatever text or crazy things that ChatGPT will tell you. So ChatGPT is built over all our data, of all of us, the one we allowed to be around, the one we didn't allow, the one which is covered by IP, the one who is not, everything goes there. So first you need huge capabilities to keep that data, and you need huge capabilities to build the systems that do it. At this moment, only a couple of companies can do that at that level. And they are, therefore, they have the power to do it. There is no public organization, or increasingly less number of public organizations, that then can compete at this level. It doesn't mean that we cannot change it. There are more ways to do AI than to just putting more data and more computational power into this mountain. We do need to start looking at those alternatives, and we need to start putting rules in the way that we are building it. Whatever another issue of power that they have is that they control the whole stack of techniques that are there. They control the digital infrastructures, they control the data, they control the learning algorithms, they control the so if you see those things, they are all kind of stacked on top of each other. But because they control it all, it becomes more a kind of blocks of plasticine that then you start putting together, and you know what happens with plasticine when you play a lot with it. It becomes some gray blur that no one knows anymore. We need rules there. We need rules which says these things are not blocks of plasticines, they are Lego blocks, and they can be only stacked in a certain way. And if you control this one, you probably shouldn't control the one on top.
Sitting in Vienna, being in Europe, where this AI Act has been introduced a couple of weeks ago, can you tell us a little bit on how it can be regulated, and especially how Europe can regulate things that are not developed in Europe, but developed elsewhere?
Yes.
And if it's true that this Brussels effect everyone is hoping of, that the first regulation will then spread the world, and that companies will, because they want access to Europe, will consider these regulations and put it into place. Is it more hope than reality, or can it really be the way things will go?
It is definitely not more hope than reality. It is again a matter of narrative. We are taught or made to believe that regulation in AI or regulation in the digital world is a wrong thing. We don't want regulation. That's kind of the regulation is bad, regulation will disturb innovation and so on. But nothing is less true. None of you I don't know how many of you arrived here by car or by public transport. None of you would come here by public transport if you didn't knew that those people driving the buses have a driver's license, that you didn't knew that there are traffic rules in the city, that the people stop at red lines, that cars drive in the left or in the right, in which direction they go, and that those cars have no brakes or no seat belts or no airbags. We accept regulation and we trust regulation in all other sectors. We were talking about the COVID vaccine before. None of us would accept the COVID vaccine if we didn't knew that those things have been built with some type of regulation on top of it. We seemingly think that by putting regulation on AI, things are going to go wrong. Nothing is less true. If we are putting regulation on AI, we are determined that who is using these things needs to have a driver's license. At this moment, any one of you can go home, watch a YouTube film tonight and learn how to set up a neural network about anything, start a company tomorrow and start selling your neural network trained in whatever data you found online. We all can do that. There is no rules deciding who can build an AI system or not. There are no brakes or seat belts or anything on AI. There are no traffic rules about what and when can we use AI in the public sphere. And putting those things there doesn't mean that we are going to break innovation, but means exactly that we are improving and we are contributing for innovation. We are directing in which ways we want these systems to be built, not to be irresponsible and dangerous, but to be aligned with what we find important.
Why, especially with technology and digital technology, we tend to ignore all those security lines and we tend to overtrust things, and why there is no other industry coming into their place? And I'm thinking about copyright. Because if you think about the music industry and what the music industry did to YouTube and Spotify, they were very clear. They said, you are not allowed to use stuff we have copyright on. And they were so powerful that YouTube and Spotify and everyone had to work with them. But with the copyright thing, I mean, those companies, they are scraping the net, they are scraping every website, and they don't ask for access or they don't pay for it. Why? Why is no one coming into their way?
Because again, they made us believe that there is no other way to build this type of systems. That if we want the capabilities of ChatGPT, we need to accept that ChatGPT is built in this kind of Wild West way. It's again, one thing is their size. The companies are so big that they have power over any government in the world, and I have seen that in action many times. So they will tell the European Union, okay, if you don't, it's recently even Elon Musk and X say, if you don't want it, then we'll not give it. X was now just in Brazil doing that, and when they say then we stop X here, then people start screaming, no, we do want to have X. So we create to ourselves a situation in which we feel that we don't have alternatives. And our governments feel that they don't have alternatives. Our governments are built over those systems. There would be no government if there is no Microsoft to put the tools that they use. So we also interact with our governments, with our public service through these companies. If they turn off their service, there will be no way to ask online for, I don't know, your renewal of your driver's license or so on. So in a sense, we let it go too far. And because it's now too far, it's becoming more difficult to come back to our sense, but doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it.
You said you saw those companies in action putting pressure on politicians in Brussels. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? I find it really interesting. How does it work?
How does it work? You get one of those big names, Musk, Altman, or whatever, getting into contact with the European Union president or officers, and kind of threatening in terms of, yeah, if you, we need to have, or you cannot do without us, so you need to do what we want.
Choose or lose.
Exactly, yeah. If you don't want it, then we take all our service. We take Facebook and Microsoft and ChatGPT out of Europe, and you guys then have nothing, which is true, because we don't have alternatives. And we have let it go so too far. And we don't have and the way they are building it, like I say, becoming bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, it is also becoming creating this feeling that there is no possible other alternatives. We can build AI in different ways. We can build AI in smaller, modular, responsible, trustable, verifiable parts of systems. It's more complex. It will require much more research and investment, but will lead at the end of the day to a much more verifiable and trustable type of systems.
When it comes to the European Union, I guess it doesn't help that, for example, we rely on, or we relied until very recently on SpaceX rockets to get our satellites into space.
Everything. Like I said, they are at all levels. And because they are at all levels, they will tell you, okay, you don't want X in Europe, and we don't let you use our SpaceX systems to put your satellites in.
Is there any natural border, natural frontier when it comes to data, because those systems need so much data, they are running out of data, they have scrapped the internet, they have taken everything they could, they don't work very well on synthetic data. People start talking about the Habsburg jaw, because those machines don't really work on recycled data. Is there a natural border, because it's just not enough data in the world for artificial intelligence?
First thing, data is not a natural resource. Data is something that we construct. It's built. It's like other systems. There are decisions about what data which sensors we put, which sensors we use, what type of attributes we are going to select, what type of groups or of type of moments we are selecting the data. So everything is constructed. It is an artificial system, the data sets, as much as AI is artificial. So there are decisions, and once there are decisions, there are choices to be made, and those choices are made based on whatever power or whatever interests are there that can make those choices. The fact that we say there is no more data can be true, but data is not reality. And the fact that we have a lot of data doesn't mean that we are better able to deal with that reality if the data is not really aligned with the reality. Again, there are other ways to deal with AI than just by putting more data into the bucket. The pile of data is becoming more and more a pile of hubris, of dirty, of nonsense. Our brains don't. If we talk about AI as being a kind of working as our brains don't work just based on the raw data. It's not for nothing that we talk about data, information, knowledge, wisdom, and so on. At the level of AI, what we are doing, we are keeping all the data at the most basic level of not being able to distinguish or not wanting to distinguish between different types of data. We are also not really looking at how can we abstract from this data, how can we find other ways to conserve and to use the data that is not just at the basic level of the building blocks, which is what our brain can do. And so we do need to firstly start thinking about other ways of building these systems that are not just requiring. It's in a sense what I often say to my students, we at this moment are extremely lazy in the way that we are dealing with AI. We are just going for the idea that more data is better, and so we just collect more data, and more data needs more computational power, so we build bigger infrastructures. And we are not thinking about how can we do it differently. There are, and that's been in the history of AI, many other alternatives. At this moment, we start talking about the neurosymbolic, which means we have the data, the basic data, but also information about the rules or the meaning of this data, which is something which is quite, has been quite normal in a decade ago in AI, which was lost because then we thought data is going to do everything, but now we are going back to those type of models and possibilities, and there will be other ones.
How do we get better data? I was told that, for example, when it comes to text data, because Reddit is opened, there is a big overweight in all those systems of people talking about fantasy novels, because on Reddit you get tons of data about fantasy novels because there are so many people talking about it, and it's free accessible for those companies. So now in the whole text body,
that's the problem. More words don't mean better data, don't mean better AI. What we are doing is we are generating and keeping more and more words, text, and we are forgetting that text is generated above a very minimal set. With 26 letters, we can make any text of the world. And there are ways, some of those texts are meaningful, some of them are gibberish. We can combine those letters in a billion or uncountable ways, which most of them are gibberish. What we are doing now is we are keeping track of all the possible gibberish words and nonsense texts that can be created with these 26 letters. And we somehow forgot that there are ways through which we construct text out of these 26 letters. I mean, in our alphabet, and that's where we need to go back to. We need to go back to the idea that we have a very simple set of building blocks, 26 letters, that there are rules about how to put those letters together, and that there are semantics to what we are, with these letters put together mean. If we don't go back there, it makes no sense to think that we can keep, generating infinite nonsense pieces of text, but that is not going to improve your AI.
But how to curate data in a better way? And isn't there a paradoxon? Because on the one hand, those machines need an incredible amount of data in order...
But that's what I'm trying to say. They don't need, or I mean, okay. Theoretically, we don't need all this data. Okay. We can do things differently. We are now thinking that if we keep every word ever written and the ones which might be written later, that will get us a better system. But what I'm saying is, no, let's go back. We have 26 letters, we have some rules, we have some semantics. Let's build systems that take that into account, and that therefore we don't have to keep for posterity all the gibberish words that can be generated, but that we know and the systems know how to use these very simple building blocks in the same way, in a meaningful way, than that we can do now. And for that, we only need a system which can keep 26 symbols on it. I mean, there will be something in between, but we need to change the way we think about AI. More data is not better AI, definitely, and is not better systems and not better societies, for sure.
You mentioned the staggering energy consumption of those big systems. We know that Sam Altman, we have already heard about him, is negotiation with the US government to build up power plants for his data centers that require 5 gigawatts of electricity. That is what 3 million people in the industrialized world need in a year. Is this something that, as you mentioned, we do not talk about as well? We don't talk about, we talk about the outcome, we talk about the results, we talk about how AI can save the world, but we don't talk about the harms, the real an already sizable harms.
We are talking more and more about harms. There are two types of harms. The environmental harms, so water and energy is two that are increasingly spoken about. We are also more and more speaking about the use of natural materials, the rare metals that are needed to build any of our telephones, which are being extracted in mines, again, with very bad conditions in parts of the world in which there are not much regulation. So there are these environmental things, energy, water, and rare metals, but there are also social costs. Let's just start with the environmental costs. Again, here we are being convinced that we do need to keep every gibberish word that can be generated by a system, and we have to keep it for posterity in a data center, and therefore those data centers get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. We are seriously and urgently to start thinking about other ways of keeping the data that we have, which definitely doesn't need such a big thing, but needs more research and fundamental research. We need to have rules about how big these systems can be, how much energy we can use. As a researcher in this field, we publish research to each in the field. How are papers in AI being evaluated? By the quality of the accuracy of your algorithm. It says, last year I published an algorithm or a paper which said that I could do something with, I don't know, an accuracy of 80%, for instance, image analysis or scan analysis or so on. Last year I improved the cancer the analysis of cancer scans with 80%, and now this year I did some improvement, and it's now 81%. Great, your paper is accepted because you got an improvement. No one is asking us, even there, how much more energy do you use? How much more computational power do you use? How much more, what type of data do you put there? What did you do to the people that were the origins of those data? So we are improving AI by looking at the accuracy of the algorithm without looking at the costs of those algorithms. And therefore, it makes no sense for us as developers and of this field to really be concerned about that. It's very easy to ask the conferences or the journals in which these papers are published to tell, okay, ask not only the accuracy, but ask also something about the impact of that. Some of them are doing it, but it's still not enough.
There is an incredibly efficient storage center, and everyone has it. It is the human brain. And there is, scientists start to experiment in whether or not we can storage data in human DNA. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Is this just another thing of phantasma or Frankensteinish idea, or is it something that we really should think of, just given the fact that the human brain, for example, runs on, I think, 20 watt?
Yeah. So the human brain doesn't keep all the data that we don't keep forever all the images of every single split second of our lives. Our brain is able to abstract and to reconstruct from those abstractions images from, so if I remember, my brain is not keeping all the pixels of the images that of the moment that we have been here for a couple, I don't know, half an hour or whatever. But later I will be able to reconstruct more or less the image with sufficient clarity what we have done here. Again, the AI would be keeping every pixel of every split second of activity that we have had here and keeps all those images stored somewhere in those data centers. So we need to look at abstraction. It's a type of method that we use in our brain, which we don't understand very well yet, but it doesn't mean that we cannot understand better. It is, again, what I say, we are being lazy. We are just keeping all the data without looking at other types of approaches. Whether is that going to be built on DNA or whatever else, I don't really care. I think that what we need, from the perspective of the computational perspective, or the software perspective, if you want. I don't really care much about which medium we are going to use, but we do need to improve our methods and our tools to store data.
Are there any questions? Andrea, please.
A naive question, but sorry, it might be a naive question. I still want to pose it. We have seen in the history a lot of developments. You have big companies, you have monopolization, you have concentration, and then you always have a counterculture, which means you have big pharmaceutical industry, you have big banking system, you have big media companies. You will have someone, so to say, developing a counterculture to it. You said that this is a necessity, but my question would be, do you also see some concrete examples? Or is the question too big, and so to say the possibilities for counterculture are locally more or less impossible?
No, there are examples, definitely. So one of the most visible examples is the open source and open access community, in which instead of building those huge systems and keeping that all secretly inside OpenAI or X or Facebook or whatever, just making it open access, so the software that I build is then available to everybody else, and then you can build on each other's and combine and so on. So that's one of the most well-known counter movements. There is also an increasingly, still small, but increasingly movement towards modular AI. So instead of building the big things, building small local learning systems, and then see how we can put these things together. Most of this at this moment is still at, let's say, the academic university level. We see also some of these movements appearing, for instance, in Africa or in the global south, where they have typically much less data, much less access, and they are Africa is at this moment the continent in the world where there are the most young people which are really being very creative and very going forward with other alternatives. We don't look enough at what's happening there, but I think that we should much more. And finally, we are still again being convinced by the big tech that, for instance, this open access is extremely dangerous, because if you tell how your algorithm works, then the bad guys will come and use those algorithms to do bad things. And they convinced us, and especially convinced governments, that we cannot open the thing. Maybe, yes, but bad guys depends, of course, in which side of the situation are to decide what are the bad and the good. That's one, but I'm not going there. But the other one is that opening it up, okay, might get those dangers, but at the same time guarantees that the control is made by everybody, so that everybody can look at what everybody else is doing. And by doing in that open way, there is not only the bad guys, but also the good guys building on those systems.
We had two other questions, at least. Maybe with the lady in the red.
Thank you. Thank you for a very, very interesting and visionary discussion. So my question is about humanities and all these technical specialists. So we're in the Vienna Humanities Festival, we're talking about AI, and actually, as I've heard, the main idea of today's discussion is that at the moment, we really need some people with humanity brains to take this into their hands. Otherwise, nothing good will happen. There will be no regulations, there will be like chaos of fake texts, data is very biased. It's the most predictable something, but we don't know what actually do we predict, etc., etc. Yeah. And so we do need people who understand how culture works, how the diversity works.
Yes.
At the same time, we know that during the last, 20 years, all the STEM departments in the universities have been funded really a lot, and all the humanities departments like shrinking. So, and the problem is that actually I do not understand whether the STEM people really think the same about the humanities challenges for AI. Do they really think that people who understand how culture and how social communities work can be of use to improve artificial intelligence? And is there any perspective in collaboration, as you said, like this is the best superpower of two persons working together?
Yeah. Exactly. Very good question, thank you. And it reminds me of something I didn't talk yet now. So from my perspective, and I say it again and again, AI is not a technology. AI is really interdisciplinary, a social technical type of. We cannot separate AI constructs from the environment and from the context in which those constructs are developed and used. So we really need to look at AI much more from an interdisciplinary, cross-disciplinary, beyond disciplines type of way than just as a technology. What is the main difference, I think, between the STEM or the engineering people and the humanities people? In STEM, we are trained to solve problems, to look at the how. There is a problem, we go solve it. We don't ask ourselves, why is it a problem? For who is it a problem? No, we just go and blindly, I mean, if you're exaggerating now, but blindly go and take the solution, go for the solution. We do need the humanities, the social science, to ask the why. Why is this a problem? Why should we use AI in the first place? Is AI the best solution for whatever issue that we are considering? What are alternatives? How are we going to decide between the different alternatives? Which values are we going to use to make those decisions? Is that just commercial values or economic values, or do we need to look at fairness, at human rights, at whatever other values? Those questions are starting to be discussed also in STEM, and nowadays most AI courses or studies include some type of impact, ethics, responsibility, but it's still taken very much as you build your system, and at the end we have a kind of a checklist. Oh, okay, did you look at ethics? Yes. Okay, we are good. We need to be much more integrated, and it's not just that you do whatever you want and at the end you check whatever if it's good or not, but it needs to be much more merged together so that while you are building, you are asking the right questions. And there we do need to have much more collaboration across the disciplines.
Thank you so much for your talk. I have a conundrum that I'd like to hear your thoughts on. And it comes from my observations of how AI has moved into my field, which is mineral supply chains. And particularly, there's this phenomenon of all of these shady AI startups approaching the US government, approaching sort of end-use companies and offering their services, promising, of course, to do away with all of the issues with transparency and due diligence. If only you would set up a contract with them to use their system, right? I've been struggling with this tension between accountability in AI as well as compensation for people who are used as data sources versus anonymity, which is a very important principle, say, of research that involves human beings. And so what are your thoughts on this accountability versus anonymity tension, particularly in AI? Thank you.
Good question. I don't know if we need really to see them as one versus the other. I think we need to take them together. It's not just a question, either you are accountable or you are anonymous, but probably we need to put the things together. And again, here, the issue will be one of looking at things from a more layered perspective. It's not just the data at the basic level of the data points, but and at that level you can probably keep anonymity, but if you create some type of accountability layers, then you can put anonymity at one level and accountability at another level, making sure that both things are aligned in somehow. But I would need to, it's an issue which requires much more work and also talking about it. Yeah. No, thank you.
2 questions.
I think. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. It's been discussed quite a bit that AI may already reinforces existing biases, and it's kind of, like a dictatorship of the average. So, for example, if you develop a system for skin cancer detection that will be riddled with the existing medical bias against people with darker skin tones and all that, a photo of somebody's face with tumors may not be recognized as a photo, so that person can't register. Do you think this is a problem that's always inherent in AI because of the way it's built up, or may it be possible to reduce it with this modular approach?
It is inherent from the technology or the methods that we use nowadays. So these correlation methods, statistical methods, which find a pattern based on what you see in the data. These methods are good to look, let's say, at the normal distribution, so at the big curve in the normal distribution, are very bad to deal with outliers, the tails in one extreme or another. So as long as we keep only using this type of statistical methods, correlation and distributions, for the developing of the algorithms, we are inherently accepting this type of issues. But again, the point is, first, AI is not just the algorithm or not just the data. We need to be able to also include the human expertise and human insights and capability to deal, for instance, with outliers and see now this something is wrong here and put it all together. So indeed, other alternatives to the idea that putting all the data together and deal with all the data in the same way as a big lump of thing will necessarily improve on this type of problems. We'll probably introduce other types of problems, but that's why we need to remain being critical. Not only the curation of data, it's not the main issue. Also the methods that we use in the algorithm, so these statistical methods, even if the data is very good, the fact that some characteristics are less represented in that data than others. So if you have a whole bunch of data about triangles in which the 99% of those triangles are red, and you only have like 1% of triangles that are blue, then you will always have a problem of averaging things, so the likelihood that the system will predict the next triangle to be red is much higher than. So it's not just, the data can be fine, but the way we use the data introduces some of these issues.
There are 2 more questions, and
just picking up on the debate about humanities and STEM, let me introduce a third element into that, which is commercial interests. Because I like your idea of there needs to be an engagement of both sides in this, but I think we can date back to ever since Google decided to drop its slogan, "Don't be evil," and considered being evil actually a useful part of their strategy. They have, of course, resisted any regulatory intervention that might damage their profit line. And we've seen this with all the big companies, and of course the absorption of all the startups, so that competition is extremely restricted. And this is particularly a question for the United States, obviously, because that's where most of them are based. So the question is, can we hope for that engagement of the humanities and the sciences in the issue of AI without significant regulatory engagement by the US government? i.e., if we don't have that, it may be desirable, but it's never going to happen.
I think there are two different things. One is indeed the regulatory efforts. One of the questions that we need really to put in the agenda of governments and international agencies is the size of these companies. Do we need to have in the world companies which are bigger than any of our governments? What does that mean? And why do we want companies of those sizes? We don't really comprehend the size of the company anymore, the ones who are inside the companies. So that's one question which can be asked and should be pushed into the agenda of governments, and that we can do by the power of the numbers. We, people of the world, are more than the ones who rule those companies. So if we keep asking for it at a certain moment, things will change, and I believe that we can change, the normal people, can change the world by asking for change. We have done that in other fields. So we do need to ask about what are we doing with this? Why do we need this type of huge companies? What are we doing with it, and what are alternatives? You can just put a size on those companies and force them to split in smaller sizes and force them to have barriers between those splits and so on. So I'm not an economist, but I believe that that would be possible. So that's one. The other one is keeping the discussion about the why and the impact and the consequences of the systems that we are building. Whether they are commercial or non-commercial, they all have societal, individual, economical, and environmental impact. We do need to analyze those impacts. We do need to understand what are potential other impacts and consequences. So that is some question for the humanities and the social science, that in a sense the humanities and the social sciences have very much being always sitting on the outside of society, looking at what's happening and then saying, is it right or wrong? Engineers, the ones who build the systems, we are much more able to stand with our feet in the mud and build stuff. We don't really know what we are building, but we are there with, and we need to combine. So we need to put the humanities and the social science with their feet in the mud and feel what's happening, not just kind of from far away looking at what's happening, but we also need to, as we do that, then they will help the engineers to think about, yeah, you are building all that, but is that really what you want to build? Is that really what we want you to build? So we need much more collaboration.
I guess Mr. Rockefeller never thought that his company would be broken up at one point, and it did break up, or it was broken up. We started with the lady in red. We will end with the gentleman in stripes.
Thank you very much. Very, very nice discussion. I really like the idea that you have of not collecting the data without seeing the consequences. I totally agree with you. But on the other hand, I mean, we have been trying to be much more accurate with the data and try to build expert systems in the 80s with a couple of gurus. I remember, you know, everybody looking at MIT and what are the algorithms that they were using for image processing and everything. And this didn't work much better than the current IA methods that are at least database. What I understood that AI did is internationalize, democratize the access to the data, that we can all use the same data to produce our models and not trusting on expertise. So my question is, what is the alternative of just limiting the resources to limiting the access to the data to every one of us? Because as you mentioned, you know, everybody could build an AI system today with a couple lines of code with the data available today. Yeah. So what is the alternative of limiting the data? Because the expertise in data, first, economically was not that better, and you know, also scientifically speaking, they were not as close to the reality as we are today with the data-driven approach.
That's true. I'm one of those from the 80s and the 90s building the rule-based system, so I do know that side. The point is that if we went wrong in one direction with expert systems, now we are going wrong in the other direction. And I do believe that both the techniques and approaches have some benefits, and that's then what the neurosymbolic is about, is trying to meet in the middle, to use what we know and what is beneficial from rule-based, expert, knowledge-driven approaches with the data-driven approaches that we have today, because they kind of went in two different directions. This went, and that's usually what happens in science. You went too much this side, then the pendulum moves to the other side, and all what's there is wrong. So we do need to combine. In terms of data availability, it is a bit of a myth that we have data available to all of us. There are some data that it's open and available to all. It's often not exactly the most useful data, and at the same time we have these huge companies who have much more data than what we would ever be able to deal with, which we don't really know what they are doing and what is there. So it's also, there is also the idea that the data is available to all of us. It's unfortunately not completely correct.
Yeah. Very last question, Professor Dignum. We are in the Academy of Fine Arts. There is this painting of Hieronymus Bosch, The Last Judgment, there that depicts the fall of men. So we have bitten into this apple of AI. But isn't there also a part of a funny part or a part of fun? Because paradise is a very good place, but it's also very boring. So isn't it a good thing that we took the apple and bit into it and try to find out where it leads us?
I mean, the issue is not what AI can do, it's more what we can do with AI, and that is up to us to decide. I don't believe at all in the idea that AI is going to solve our problems. I also don't believe at all in the idea that AI is going to destroy us. It is much more about what we are doing with the technologies that we have, and it's up to us to design with the technologies that we have, but especially with what I call this natural superintelligence. We need to work much more on working together. We see the problems which our democracies are having. We see the problems that we have in geopolitical issues. But those problems will not go AI with the idea that we'll have some kind of God AI which is going to solve it for us. If we don't really work together in really what matters for us as people, AI is not going to do it for us. So we are the ones who can design that paradise and decide what paradise is.
Thank you very much.